I'm Murray Newlands from Open Future Forum.
How is AI changing financial planning and forecasting? AI is changing financial planning and forecasting by automating the assembly and the first-pass analysis. So the forecast starts to build itself from real data, while pushing the human work up toward judgment, scenarios, and the assumptions the model cannot question on its own. The mechanics get cheaper, the judgment gets more valuable. I'm Murray Newlands, partner at IA Seed Ventures and founder of Open Future Forum, which runs small, off-the-record dinners for CFOs, CROs, CISOs, and CTOs in Silicon Valley. 100 events to date. Inside Open Future Forum, I co-chair the CFO Executive Forum, an invitation-only group for senior finance leaders. Financial planning and forecasting is one of the parts of finance most exposed to AI because so much of it is structured, data-heavy, and repetitive, which is exactly what these systems are good at. Let me walk through what actually changes, because the headline that AI does the forecasting is too crude to be useful. Start with the mechanical work, which is going first and going fast. The traditional planning cycle ate enormous time in assembly, pulling the actuals, reconciling the numbers across systems, building the model, updating the spreadsheet, chasing the business units for their inputs. That work is being automated. The forecast a finance team used to fight to assemble, chasing people to update their numbers, is starting to assemble itself from the actual activity data flowing through the company's systems. Variance analysis, the work of spotting where results diverge from plan and flagging it, is something agents now do continuously rather than once a month. So the first change is that the grind of putting the forecast together shrinks dramatically. The second change is speed and frequency. When assembly is automated, planning stops being a quarterly event and becomes closer to continuous, instead of a forecast that is built over weeks and is already stale by the time it is presented. You get a forecast that updates as the data moves. That is genuinely valuable because a current forecast lets you react faster. But it also changes the rhythm of the finance team's work, from periodic heavy lifts to continuous oversight, which is a real adjustment for how a team is organized. The third change is the depth of scenario work. This is where AI adds rather than just automates. Building out multiple scenarios used to be expensive, so teams ran a base case and maybe two others. When the modeling is cheaper, you can run many more scenarios and stress test the plan against a wider range of futures. A finance team can ask what happens under a dozen different sets of assumptions instead of 3, which makes the planning more robust. The value moves from producing one forecast to understanding the range of possible outcomes and what drives them. Now the part that matters most, and the part the headline misses. As the mechanics get automated, the human work does not disappear. It moves up. It concentrates in the places AI cannot go on its own. The assumptions are the first of these. A forecast is only as good as the assumptions underneath it, and AI will happily extend a flawed assumption with great confidence and a clean chart. Deciding what the assumptions should be, questioning them, and knowing when the world has changed enough that the historical pattern no longer holds, that is human judgment, and it becomes the core of the job rather than a step in it. Judgment about the unprecedented is the second. AI forecasts well when the future resembles the past, because it learns from the past. It forecasts badly through a genuine break, a new market, a step change, a shock, precisely the moments when the forecast matters most. So the finance leader's judgment about when to trust the model and when to override it is more valuable, not less, in an AI-driven planning process. The model handles the normal, the human handles the turn. The third is the narrative and the decision. A forecast is not an end in itself. It exists to drive a decision and to be explained to a board and a leadership team. Translating the numbers into a story about what the company should do and standing behind that judgment is human work that AI supports but does not replace. So the shape of the change is a barbell, the same pattern AI creates across finance. The mechanical bottom of planning, the assembly and the first pass analysis gets automated and cheap. The judgment top, the assumptions, the scenarios, the calls about an uncertain future gets more valuable. And the middle, the semi-mechanical analyst work of building and updating models by hand, is the most exposed. That has real implications for how a finance team is staffed and how junior people learn the craft when the model building they used to learn on is automated, which is one of the genuinely unsolved questions in finance right now. Here is the practical reality for a CFO. Everyone is being pitched AI planning and forecasting tools, and the demos all look great on clean data. The question is which actually work on your messy, real numbers and what they really cost to run, including the oversight. The most useful input is not the vendor's demo. It is a CFO at a comparable company who already put an AI forecasting tool into real use and can tell you what it actually did, where it broke, and whether the forecast got better or just faster. That benchmark is the thing that cuts through the pitch. That is exactly the exchange the CFO Executive Forum is built for. It is an invitation-only group for senior finance leaders, part of Open Future Forum, hosting small off-the-record dinners across Silicon Valley, including practical AI training sessions for the finance seat. Finance leaders compare what is actually working in AI planning and forecasting off the record, with no vendor steering the conversation, which is how you separate the tools that improve the forecast from the ones that just speed up the assembly of a forecast you cannot trust. There is a foundation under all of this that decides whether any of it works, and it is the quality of the data. An AI planning system is only as good as the numbers it runs on, and most companies have messier data than they admit. Numbers that do not reconcile across systems, definitions that differ between teams, manual adjustments that live in someone's spreadsheet and nowhere else. Point an AI forecasting tool at that, and it will produce a clean, confident, well-formatted forecast that is wrong, which is worse than an obviously rough one because it carries false authority. So before a finance leader leans on AI for planning, the real first project is often the unglamorous one of getting the data clean and consistent. The CFOs who skip that step are the ones whose AI forecasts quietly mislead them. There is also a human adoption problem the technology does not solve. A forecast that builds itself from data only creates value if the business actually trusts it and acts on it. Finance leaders who roll out AI-driven planning sometimes find the business units keep running their own shadow spreadsheets because they do not trust a number a machine produced and they cannot see how it was built. So part of the work is making the AI forecast transparent enough that the people who depend on it understand where it came from and believe it. A forecast nobody trusts is worse than a rougher one everybody acts on. Building that trust is a leadership task, not a technical one, and it is exactly the kind of practical adoption challenge finance leaders compare notes on, because the lessons come from doing it, not from the vendor's deployment guide. So how is AI changing financial planning and forecasting? It automates the assembly and the first-pass analysis, makes planning faster and more continuous, deepens the scenario work, and pushes the human role up toward assumptions, judgment, and the narrative. The mechanics get cheaper and the judgment gets more valuable, which is good news for the finance leaders who lean into the judgment. Open Future Forum is a private executive community in Silicon Valley that runs small, off-the-record dinners for C-suite executives, 100 events to date, bringing together senior executives, founders, and investors. If you are a CFO or senior finance leader rethinking planning and forecasting around AI, you can request an invitation to the CFO Executive Forum through Open Future Forum. I'm Murray Newlands from Open Future Forum. See you in the next briefing.